Welcome to One Bad Podcast. Here's your hosts, KD and Shaner.
Kurt, you were saying this just before we jumped on. It's been how many episodes now? We finally get to talk about a hit song. Finally, we're there. We're at Scarecrows. Or as we've heard many times in our career, Scarecrow.
That's right, Scarecrow, the singular. And yeah, it took us this long in this podcast and in our real lives to write a hit single. Who knew,
Well, that's the thing, 10 years to your first hit, but there's bands that never got there. So, I still think we're ahead of the curve, even when this happened.
We're better than some bands is what you're saying. That's the title.
Well, I do feel like the times that we thought to ourselves, like, oh, I wish we were bigger and all of that. I mean, even in this country, there's probably millions of bands, so you always temper the way you talk to yourself by realizing that a lot of bands came and went over the last 20 years that we've played with. A lot of next big things came and went while we kept rising. So I always take that as a badge of honor,
Oh, me too, man. And I think of all the songs, I mean, if someone said, what's the song that from OBS catalog that's the most special to you, I'd probably say Scarecrows, because it was that first hit, and I always say, songwriting, it's it's a little bit of magic when it happens right, as we've found, right? When it happens right, the song seems to come out of thin air, that's the beauty of songwriting and of rock and roll. And with this song, it kind of came out of nowhere, and you're always craving that high as a musician. And once you get it once, it's like you always want to go back to the well. But as Leonard Cohen said, if I knew where all the good songs came from, I'd go there more often. Right?
It's really true, buddy. And honestly, this episode might turn into the All Scarecrows episode, because I think there's a lot of stories around this song. Like, I remember we all loved it. Like you just said, there was something about it we couldn't quite put our finger on. Like, it went through some different iterations. Remember, it was really fast when we first started. It was like kind of the super up tempo thing. And then I think we slowed it way down. It took a bit to take shape. But I also remember the first time we ever played it live was, I think, maybe at Bud's, and it just absolutely bombed. I don't know if you remember that.
No,
but
I don't remember that.
Absolutely.
I've blacked out so many parts of that of those years, but I didn't.
Well, You've often said to me that the joy of being a drummer is you can put your head down and pretend you're somewhere else
behind the cymbals. Yeah. And I've got mad respect for you, because you can't do that.
It's like the music equivalent of having your nose rubbed in it. It's like, not only are you bombing, but you got to stand there and watch. And that's my burden.
And you have to engage with the crowd even though you want to leave.
Well,
that's crazy.
You guys like that one? No. Well, here's a different one.
Well, so the crowd didn't like it. Well, and that makes sense. I remember anytime we'd write original songs that were mellow, compared to the hard stuff, they'd bomb, because people were like, they don't know it, and they also can't push the person on the dance floor beside them. They can't mosh to it, right?
Well, it's true, and it's interesting to bring it up, because there's a long story, and I don't know if a lot of people know how we pick singles and that's probably a thing to talk about here too, but. Yeah, there is a long story behind the song, but that's one of the things, we would always try new songs out, and our crowd was great for being stoked to hear stuff. They still are, but you couldn't always go off of if it got a response live. Cause weirdly, some tunes, you're right. If you're playing a rock set, so if you're playing an up tempo rock tune, even if they haven't heard it, well, you can go crazy to it. But this song, it took some listening, you know what I mean? And I think I'm probably going to get more animated about this as the podcast goes, but we're in the content era, right? And it's almost like, oh, one listen and who gives a shit. But
yeah,
sometimes a tune does take some listens before it hits you. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I definitely remember it bombing a couple of times. But we knew there was something about it, right? We just knew we had to stick with it. As I said, when we recorded it, yeah, it went through a bunch of tempo changes and just, different kind of arrangements. And it was always a little bit of a weird song. It's a little Zeppelin-y, I think, in that it doesn't have, this big core, like a Foo Fighters kind of chorus. It was just kind of, I don't know, it was just a different sort of a moody song for us, right? And we stuck to our guns on it, because our label, they loved it. They couldn't wait to get it on the radio. They couldn't wait to throw money at it, hey?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I remember. So, well, first off, yeah, just some background on how we pick singles. You know, you and I and Hicks essentially, and Granny at the time would, just agree on what we like as a band, but that wouldn't always jive with what the label wants or the management wants or our radio tracker. So there's three other parties involved besides the band. So it wasn't like we had carte blanche to do whatever we want, right? I mean,
Yeah.
now we sort of do, but it took us 20 years to get here. But but Scarecrows, they didn't. All we heard was the reasons why it wouldn't be a hit, right? So first off, it's not active enough for active rock radio was the big slight against it. Number two, there's no real chorus, like you said. And I was like, oh, well, but I also thought so many of my favorite songs don't have choruses, right? Like Nautical Disaster, there's no chorus. It's just kind of like, it's just epic. And then third, it was just sort of, I remember someone said that the first rhyme, everybody says I want things I got like,
Oh yeah.
Like, someone didn't like that because it's just they didn't like that first rhyming couplet, and I was like, what?
Because we rhyme no with no.
It's a double.
And I'm like, well, that's the point is that like it, but it's two different versions of that. It was just, and it sounded fine,
I love that.
Van Halen did that a couple times, so I was fine with it.
Yeah, no, I love that rhyme of no and no. To me, that's brilliant. But yeah, anyway, so it was shot down basically. So we end up releasing Rust Bucket as the first single, but it had already been released previously by us, but just kind of amateurly released. So we opened our first big major label single was Rust Bucket, and it bombed. And then we're like, okay, we let the label and radio team pick the first single. Now we get the second single, and that's where. And they basically said, sure, you guys get this pick, and if it bombs, then that's it. You're done, basically.
Yeah, you're done.
Like,
and how many times have we faced that in our career? Like this moment of like, this is it, right? And then we sit around, like you said, the four of us, and say, well, fuck, I don't know. Like, but can we just try to pick? Because you made a good point. Like, what I was going to say is, why can't we just pick the best song? Because you made a great point. They're like, well, it needs to be more active. Well, you're a rock band, so your first single should be like this big rock hit. And I mean, Rust Bucket it's a great song. Like it went over great live, like back to that point. And we loved the song, but was it going to be a top 5 hit? Well, how do you know? But they give you all these things like, well, it's rock. And then you want people to know you're a rock band. And we were like, well, if no one fucking adds it, they're not going to know who we are anyways. Right. So I don't know how many times we came back to this same point in our career, which was, can we just pick the best song? Like, let's forget whether or not it's got super heavy guitars, or like, let's forget about, all of these things that the people on our so-called team would be telling us, and can we just go with the song that we think is the best song, right? Which is really what it came down to with this.
I love that. I love that you're wearing a Zeppelin shirt because it makes you realize why Zeppelin never released singles. It's probably because of this stupid, they just released albums, right? And they didn't have to worry about all this garbage. But yeah, just talking about this brings me back to those days. And it's not like we're out of those days. Like even now picking singles, we see like we know what our next single is, and we're super stoked. But it's not like everyone's always on the same page, right? In terms of people on your team. At the end of the day, I think, and this is another piece of advice for other bands out there. I mean, all you have as an artist is your gut instinct, and you got to rely on that. You got to trust it. It doesn't mean you're going to be not going to be wrong sometimes, but I mean, that's what you have that no one else on your team will have, right? They won't know your music the way you know it. And it doesn't mean you can't take advice from people on your team, but if their advice goes way against what your gut instinct is telling you, you got to say no to it, right? And because again, all you have is, as Neil Young said, it's like the one thing that makes an artist a real artist is the ability to fail as well as succeed, right? Like, so if we're going to fail, it's going to be on our own terms, not like because someone else made us fail. It's like we chose a certain thing and it failed. But then if we succeed, then we own it as well. I mean, I do think you and I and the rest of the guys in the band, like we can own those successes because it wasn't like people like, hey, here's your hit. It's Scarecrows. We had to fight for it. Same with the next one, It Ain't Right. They thought it was too political. And the third one, Retribution Blues, they thought, well, it's got the word blues in the title, so they'll never play it on rock radio.
It literally were like, they won't play a song with blues in the title. And Seven Seas Blues just came out by Monster Truck. And I remember telling our label, I was like, the number, whatever it was, like 2 song in the country right now has blues in the title. So your argument is absolutely idiotic. And we should say, and for new bands coming up and bands that start to get management and get labels and all that, like, this is commercial art, right? And the thing that you give a break, you give your label a bit of a break and your handlers and stuff, because like money's involved. And if you're going to sink $15,000 into marketing a single, it's not their fault that they get so in their heads about like, what they want. You see it in Hollywood all the time. Like, they want to know something will be a hit. That's why we get so many shitty sequels and prequels, and because they think,
stuff,
well, totally, right. And because now they've like, I'm a farm kid, so I can say this, they've milked that cow far too often. But no, but honestly, you can cut a bit of a break because you understand, like, it's not your money coming out. Like, you don't have to take $10,000 out of your pocket and put it down. They do. So we understood that. We never try to be assholes with our label and stuff and try to say like, well, no, you're going to do this. Because you realize, I forget who I said this to once. They were like, well, just do whatever you want. And I'm like, well, would you put $15,000 of your money, like right now, out of your bank account? Would you take out loans because you believe in this song so much? And that's kind of what it comes down to. Like, we were hanging our career on this moment because you already said it. They told us straight up, like, if this bombs, you're done. The record will come out, but like, that's it. And then what did we do? This was our beginning of radio. We set up the Scarecrows radio tour, which has become kind of a thing of legend. Anybody that knows our history, and it was like, I don't even know how to summarize it. You were in Vancouver, you were like at HQ setting up all of these interviews, setting up and then Hicks and I went out in a car and just went to every station we could find when stations still let you come in, right? And I think it might have been your idea to do that because we were like, I guess, like, if that doesn't work, well, so be it.
I stole the idea from Airheads, the movie, but yeah, like I knew that I knew the song was killer. I knew that you were charming. Hicks was charming too, in his own Hicks way, But I knew that if you got in and met the people, they'd be like, hey, I like these guys, and the song's great. And then I saw Airheads. I remember they took over stations and stuff and played their song on the radio. But I knew it wasn't a takeover. It was a friendly takeover, as they say. But and I was working in Vancouver at the time, and I pretending to be busy at my law job, but it wasn't busy. So I was just spending hours a day just lining up radio gigs. It was like or like radio, like appearances. So we started in Vancouver, went to Kelowna, went to Kamloops, and just kept going east, and then got to Alberta, hit all those stations, and you guys were killing it, just driving to all these stations. But the crazy thing was that it started to work. Like, I think Kamloops played it first, Kelowna played it first, Vancouver, nothing. But it just kept going east and kept getting plays and then ads. And it was like you got to Alberta, and also we got like Grand Prairie adding it, Lethbridge, and we could just see the dominoes falling like on the map, and we got to Saskatchewan, Regina, Saskatoon added heavy rotation. So then we're like, you're in our hometown, and the song's like top 15 or something now. And we're just like, holy shit, like, let's just keep going. And I think you kept going east from Saskatoon or Winnipeg or something on your own. Because it was like, it was just you, the two of you in a car. And I think you flew, right? Is that what happened? Yeah.
Well, exactly, man. And like, you summarized it perfectly. And it was crazy because it was like, it started out with, we coordinate with you in the morning. We're like, hey, this is where we're going to hit. This is when we have to get there.
Pep talk.
And honestly, it was a pep talk. But then all of a sudden, the song was getting played before we showed up. Like, we started hearing it as we're pulling up to the station, and it was crazy. And then we check our phones every morning, and it was like added here, added here, added here. And then we, exactly that, we came to this, it was almost like a crisis moment. Hicks and I were sitting in Winnipeg, and we talked to you, and we were like, we do not have enough money to drive out to Ontario, and we don't have enough money to fly both of us out there. So we made the decision. Hicks drove from Winnipeg back to Vancouver, and I flew out to Ontario, rented a car, this little Fiat that I slept in a couple nights, and
that's right,
did the whole thing out there, and did another like week and a half out there, and that we started getting ads in Oshawa. We got ads all over the place. Like it was, like we worked that top 5, and the label didn't know what was happening, which was the story of our career with them in general. They were like, we don't know why you guys are successful. What's going on? But it was crazy. Like, honestly, it happened so quick too. No one knew what to do. Like even us, we were like, well, holy shit, we're number 5, which was unheard of. Like, especially in those days, like that's 2012, I think, when that song came out. It was really tough. It was so hard to break top 10. Like we kept getting told like, well, if you make top 20, like call it a success.
Yeah.
And like
hang it up.
15, 11, 10. It was just like, holy shit. It was crazy, man. It was honestly highlight of our career for sure. Cause it was that moment. We'd been working for a decade to that point. Like you said, to start this episode, great way to end this episode, which is like, we worked 10 years to get a hit. No one believed in it. No one believed we could do anything like that. Even our team, the people that stood to make money off of it, didn't believe in it. And then all of a sudden it was this crazy success. And that opened, that really blew things wide open for us.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to end it. Like it took us 10 years and we got there from just believing in ourselves, right? Like so many times we could have just listened to the handlers and not released that song, and we wouldn't be here talking about OBS, right? Like without Scarecrows, we wouldn't be here today, right? Because if Scarecrows wouldn't have hit, we wouldn't have probably got the next record with 604. And I mean, I didn't want to think about it, but it was like, and again, even the radio thing, it was just you can't even do that now. Stations won't allow that anymore because they're just more shut down. But we did it. It was just our own making, and it's like I give mad props to everyone who helped us along the way, but it's also like I look back and I'm like, and you and Hicks driving across the country, you flying. We had no money. That's why I remember you texted me like, I'm sleeping in my Fiat tonight, and it's like it's not even enough room to like lay down fully, right?
No,
and, just recline the seat. But we were so effing broke, and it's like, yeah, it's just I look back and I'm like, I'm not sure if I could do it again because it was just like so much work, right?
Yeah.
And so it was hard work, but it ended up working out, and it's like, yeah, it was a game changer for us.
Absolutely, man. And more to come. We'll keep talking about the Red album on the next episode.
Sweet.
Thanks for listening to One Bad Podcast.